Here at Behind the Mask, we acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original storytellers and custodians of the land on which we live and meet today. Behind the Mask is a podcast about sharing authentic stories. And in continuing that legacy of storytelling, we acknowledge that we're honouring and celebrating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' traditions, customs and stories. And we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This episode of the Behind the Mask podcast discusses issues around violence towards women, violence towards children, and domestic violence. They are confronting issues and tough issues for us as a society to face. So if you find these issues triggering right now, it's probably best to skip this episode.
I think my father only really I wouldn't even use the word love, respected, whatever you want to use, is if I won and if I brought home money.
It's purely conditional.
And I was very aware of that already as a 9, 10, 11-year-old. He used to tell me that.
When I was growing up, my older brother, Greg, was a heroin addict. And I was 7, 8, 9, not understanding what was going on in the house, but seeing it all unravel. And I very much knew then I didn't want to be that and I needed to be something else.
I wanted to change who I was. And I felt like I was defined by who my father was and what I went through, and I wanted to change that. I was looking for something and I couldn't find it. And tennis was the worst environment for that. It was always like wins. It would make me feel, that's where I get my validation from. I'm amazing. But when I wouldn't win, I would feel like a loser.
Mate, you had a heart attack 2 years ago.
What it said was that you're 50 and you are not invincible anymore. And you need to do these health checks.
He sent me a picture from the hospital saying, I just had a heart attack. We'll see if I'll make it for the launch of the Australian Open in 72 hours.
I'm Josh Pitterman. I'm a singer, actor and certified meditation teacher. I've played many roles in my life, both on and off stage, and I've worn many masks. But I've always had a curiosity for what's happening behind those masks, behind identity and the ego. I want to explore the real stories beyond the bright lights of people's journeys and get a VIP pass to the backstage tour of their lives. In this new podcast series, you'll get to know some of the most extraordinary and inspiring people behind the masks that they wear. It's an opportunity for them to share their authentic stories, their successes, sacrifices, hurdles, triumphs, fears, motivations, insecurities, and passions, as well as their self-discoveries, philosophical or spiritual awakenings, the growth mindset tools they've used, and the wisdoms and lessons they've learnt to navigate their way through life with purpose and meaning. It's time to be inspired by the depths of what it means to feel truly human. It's time to go behind the mask. I'm so honoured to have two extraordinary humans here in the Roland Media studio with me. Please welcome to the Behind the Mask podcast, Jelena Dokic and Todd Woodbridge.
Josh,
thank you
it is
so
great
much
to be with you.
Yeah.
Jelena, you're a former world number 4 women's tennis player. You made the semi-finals of Wimbledon, quarters of French and Australian. You're the author of 2 books, Unbreakable and now Fearless. Todd, you are a 16-time Grand Slam doubles champion. Am I right there?
Yeah.
Number 19 singles.
Yeah, not as high as Jelena, but yeah, top 20.
Top 20, which is extraordinary in that field. You're both in the media, you're commentators. Todd, you're the host of a game show now. But when we take off those masks of all these things that you've done, all that human doing, and let go of the identities or identity attached to those things, what's left? Who's the authentic self? Who is Jelena Dokic and who is Todd Woodbridge?
Interestingly enough, we were having a conversation in the car on the way here where there's been a big change in that person behind the mask, right? And about the difference between being a person now who are in the spaces that you've just spoken about and then the tennis space. And maybe you can jump in there.
To me first, that I have to answer
Always
the top
handball
question.
first.
I actually love that question. And it's a question that I actually had to answer to myself when I retired from tennis. I was still only 29. Injuries, mental health struggles, I had nothing left. And I always thought that what I do in tennis and who I was as a tennis player, will be as a tennis player, and how I finish is what will define me and who I am as a person and how worthy I am. And I believed that for such a long time. I mean, I grew up in an environment where tennis and money, that was it. That's what makes you who you are, both at home and I think tennis in general is quite a brutal sport and an individual sport as well. But when I really started to think about, okay, what does the rest of my life look like personally, professionally, but I also had to do a lot of my own kind of soul searching and healing. That was the question I had to ask myself. And I always used to kind of look for that validation in what I did and my successes. So I had to decide, am I going to dedicate my whole life to work, even outside of tennis? Is that who I am? Or is there a balance? Is there someone who I am outside of my work and other things I want to do? And that really actually helped me. It forced me to go, okay, I'm still only 29, 30. What's next professionally? What's next privately? And I had to dig deep and I didn't really know who I was, to be honest. I always kind of, even myself, thought, Jelena Dokic, a tennis player.
And you said to me 15 minutes ago that when you're out working now, you feel like it's a much nicer, freer, relaxed environment where people are really interested in you. You didn't feel like that in tennis necessarily.
Yeah, I didn't. That's why I say tennis is a brutal sport. There are not a lot of friendships and that's all right. Look, that's the nature of the sport. I'm lucky I've been able to go into other things like commentary, TV, speaking and working with so many different people and clients and companies, books as well. You get to work with different, obviously, publishers and people again, which has been amazing. And I never actually thought I had the ability to be that communicator or someone that could work with so many people. And ultimately, I had to answer some of those questions. And I knew that I was always very competitive. I wanted to challenge myself. I said to you, Todd, 10 years ago when we spoke about after I retired, what I wanted to do. I knew commentary and TV was on my radar. I knew I wanted to do something with my story. Didn't know what it looked like then. I was lost, but I knew I wanted to do something with it.
You didn't actually. I'm going to call her out on that because
I
didn't believe you could do anything with your story. We actually had conversations. I was working as head of men's and women's tennis at a point that Jelena was still contemplating getting back out on tour. And I mean, she nearly got me back out on tour because I had to go hit with it like 4 days a week and I was playing great again. But in all honesty, we then would sit down after training sessions and I had these discussions about, well, what are you going to do with your life? And you looked at me like, well, I'm just going to play tennis. I'm getting back on tour no matter what. And I could see that wasn't really, for me, I knew it wasn't realistic. Maybe for a small portion, but not long term. There had to be more. And you and I had this thing about, I think you could do A, B, and C. And you looked at me like I was nuts.
I did. And I think Todd actually stopped me from going back on tour. I actually think I would have.
What year's this?
8 years ago?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And it was great, actually, that I didn't. Looking back at it now, it was a great decision. I would have struggled.
Did you feel like you wanted to go back because you still were asking that question, who am I? And you still were going, it's not going to come, my validation is not coming from something inside of me. It needs to come externally. My identity is in tennis. Go back and do that so I feel like a human.
Sure. And just to delay, let's go, even if I do it for 2 or 3 more years, let's delay finding out maybe who I am and what I do next. But I think also I've discovered that, look, I'm a workaholic. I love to work. I love to do different things. I love to challenge myself, get outside of my comfort zone. I actually now don't mind making mistakes and failing because it pushes me. I go, okay, let's go back tomorrow and try and succeed in that. I like to push myself. But I've also discovered, look, I like my private time. I like to have a close circle now. I value that time with people that I know, that I can trust, and with my friends. But also I've gone, you know what, I still want to enjoy life. I don't just want to work as well. I want to travel. I want to do different things.
That's new for you.
That is new for me.
Yeah.
But also it's been
She's not been very balanced.
No.
Like you're becoming a much more balanced person now.
Yeah.
Well, because you're probably getting deeper into the values that you don't want to move.
There you go.
These immovable values.
You literally took the words out of my mouth. Now I also...
So we'll be singing breaks.
We will not be joining, even as backup singers.
Before we get to Todd and what he's kind of had to do, but I've had to go also, okay, what kind of a person am I and want to be? I grew up in an environment I didn't want to be like that. For example, like my father, he was a very dark, bitter, resentful, I would even say hateful person. I knew I wasn't like that, but I really have made it my mission to go, I want to be the opposite. So for me, I practice gratitude. I want to be kind. I want people to, I want to give people a smile. I want to make them feel better if I can inspire someone with my story. So that's really deep down now as a person who I want to be. And people can go, she's nice, she works hard, or, she's not late, she's really professional. That's important to me. So I've gone, it's also what kind of a person am I deep down? What are my core values? And I've worked hard on that the last 2-3 years.
It's something that you wouldn't think you'd have to work hard on. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a lot of people forget that you do need to work on things. I think my kind of relationship with Jelena in a way has taught me that also. It kind of makes you a little bit more understanding of people and their circumstances. And if you can step back sometimes and just look at them in that way, you really do better yourself. And it's always hard, and I know you would struggle with this too, Josh. Self-assessment we're very brutal and we don't really give ourselves enough leeway. Yeah,
the compassion that we show others often isn't the compassion that we show ourselves. And sometimes we don't even show others compassion when we're sort of in worlds that become self-absorbed and narcissistic, like a solo tennis career or solo professional performing career. But when we shift out of that and we do start really giving people the compassion they deserve and really seeing people and going, looking into the eyes of another person long enough and going, oh, I see your soul. Oh, you're wearing that suit. I'm in this suit. Oh, what's it actually like to be a human being? Then I think you start flicking that back upon yourself and going, hey, the way I talk to myself, I would never, ever talk to someone like that. That inner critic that I've got isn't helping me. How can I be an inner champion rather than an inner critic?
It's funny that I can be harsh though, can't I? I can be quite forthright, but yet at the same time, I feel like I came across a different skill that I didn't really know I possessed. Which would be mentoring, right?
Yeah.
That I didn't know.
And we'll get to that because you've been so responsible for,
Well, not really.
Well, you've been a part of the journey in mentoring.
He has. Yeah. He doesn't give himself enough credit, but you've been crucial professionally, privately as well.
I've enjoyed it. It wasn't just Jelena that.
So effectively, you said it's taught you stuff.
He helps a lot of people,
Hey, so we're going to come back to Jelena on some of the things you said there because I do want to continue on that journey. But Todd, who's Todd Woodbridge?
Complex.
How much time have you got?
Well, it's complex.
Of course it's complex. We're complex beings,
I don't know. I'm still evolving. There's no doubt about that. This last 6 months for me of a career pivot and a change is I didn't expect to be a game show host.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Yep.
No, I didn't. It was not even on my radar. But how do I end up here? Well, I think you got to go way back for me, which I talk about a little bit in that I grew up in a very normal Australian family. My dad was a police officer. My mum was a hairdresser. I was a mistake child in a sense. My brothers were 13.
You're definitely not a mistake, mate.
13 and 11 years older than me. And when I was growing up, my older brother, Greg, was a heroin addict. And I was 7, 8, 9, not understanding what was going on in the house, but seeing it all unravel. And I very much knew then I didn't want to be that and I needed to be something else. Now, tennis was already there for me then.
Hold up, just going back to that. You may not have understood it fully, but
no, you could see the damage.
Energetically, could you feel that?
Yeah,
what was going on?
Oh, because the stress. You could see the stress that was happening. Yeah. Because even back then, I lost my bike. My mum lost her mother's engagement ring. Everything was being hocked by my brother and in a pawn shop for money. Yeah. And so I understood all that part.
Yeah.
And so there was these things
How old were you, sir?
7, 8, 9.
Oh, God.
Yeah. when that was happening. And so then, my dad was a cop, so he's got this son that's committing all this crime. So there was all of this unfolding. So I was already a good tennis player then for my age. And I had this vehicle and I saw these opportunity and I watched television in those days. Wimbledon was on and the Davis Cup and all the women's stuff because we had Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley still winning stuff, and I would watch. And I saw this kind of that dream you all talk about, that something clicks in you when you're young and you want to be the phantom and all of that. And so I had this vehicle to get out. But those things were so that thing about my brother really gave me this drive to be successful. Yeah. So, I don't want to, you can't thank him in a way because there was a lot more still to play out in that, but I didn't want to be any of that.
Yeah, there's this great quote, and it's a hard quote to grasp, and I don't want to feel like I'm projecting it, but it's a Carl Jung quote, who's a great Swiss psychologist, psychiatrist, and he says, our gift lives behind the wound. And sometimes when these things happen, we actually find our best selves through it. Yeah, we use them, yeah.
So I think to move it on from that to where I kind of got to is that I became good at looking forward at people. So I was very harsh on myself as the athlete, but I used to see people that I wanted to be like and learn to work the room. There's Fred Stolle, a great Australian player. I used to watch Fred when I got a little older at tournaments and meet and greet people, and you go, gee, he's got charm and charisma, and you go, I need to be able to learn to do that. I need to be able to work hard. And you'd look at different people that would train on the court and you go, if I'm going to be good, I've got to be like that. And so I always felt like I've been quite a forward-looking person visually to use those tools for myself. And I still talk about that a lot with my own kids because we all get negative, right, and start bitching and complaining. But then you go, I've got to go forward again and look at options. And we've had a discussion maybe 4 months ago, 6 now, about...
Just on your kids, though, Zara and Bo are so like that. Our kitchen... They're really... Dream big,
But particularly Bo, my son, Zara, in a ways too, she's had her own issues with some health that she needed to fix, and that's now driving her. Yeah. She wants to become a nutrition because of that, a nutritionist. But our kitchen table is a lot like this table right now, where we throw these things around. And I grew up where I ate. This is an interesting one. I grew up in a household where I ate with my dinner on the lap in front of the television.
Really?
And I hated it. Once I got to a point, I realized that was so bad because we weren't communicating with each other. And I decided with my own family that we would always eat every meal at a table. Yeah. So we've got a big round table in our kitchen. It's the family base, but every meal is eaten there.
Yeah. And there's ritual in that.
And that becomes like these conversations that we can even have now. Yeah. And as the kids have got older, they become more sophisticated discussions.
Yeah, and we shift out of this sort of thing that we've got so often when I see, go out of restaurants and someone's taking their kids and they might be 13, 14, 15 and they're still just on their phones.
Yeah. They're not learning to engage.
They're not they're engaging not
somewhere else.
Engaging. So Todd, to go back to the question.
Sorry.
who are you? Did that have to you have a career that is, you have these big dreams and I don't know whether you achieved them all, but if you sat there at 7 or 8 and I said to you, hey, you're going to win 16 Grand Slam titles and you're going to be someone who is so revered and so respected and loved in the tennis world and in the greater world, would you have said, I achieved the dream?
I don't think you give yourself enough credit.
No, but because I feel like as soon as if I was to sit back and bathe in what you just said, you're not going to keep moving forward. I want to keep going forward.
You can keep going forward and celebrate.
I do celebrate. Actually, I find
that's the competitive side in us.
Yeah. I actually find that I balance well. I'm like Jelena. Yeah. I like to work. I work really hard, but I also do like to have my time to do the things I've done with my family. Yeah. I feel like I've been very much there as a parent, even though at times I'm away. I've always wanted to turn up because I love it, But I think that if I was to look back on my career, yes, I do a few things differently, my tennis career.
I mean, we all would.
But did I get the best out of what I had? Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I know I could do better, but when you're in your journey, there's some things you just can't alter. And I think from a tennis perspective, yes, I got everything. I tried to plan a bit my second career, even though it's been a flowing effect.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that because you get to the end of something that you've dreamed up and you've manifested into reality in some sense with all the hard work and all the diligence and all the dedication that takes. But then you go, okay, it's done. And yes, you know that the following year, what was it, about 2006, 2005 you retired, 2006 you start commentary. You know that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But
that didn't happen by accident, right?
No, of course it doesn't. But do you have the identity thing going, this part of my chapter is ending.
Yeah.
And you ask yourself, what am I without being the champion on the court? Did you ask those questions, or was it just like, nope, I'm not introspecting here. I am going on to the next thing?
No, I felt I didn't, because in say men's doubles I won so much and so often. Mediocrity didn't sit well with me, and that could be reaching a quarter or a semi. You needed to keep winning. So
it's relative.
I needed to then go, okay, what am I going to do? But I was already doing things before I finished. I was guest commentating at Master Series Mondays and Tuesdays when I knew I wouldn't be playing. I spent time as president of the Players Association. I worked those rooms. I tried to gather and educate myself as best I could without being an academic.
Yeah.
And that. So then when I finished, I was ready to start to move on, even though I wasn't sure where it was going to go, and still sometimes not sure. But they were. I felt like, and that was why when I had discussions with Jelena about what are you going to do while she's still trying to play, I knew that was important because I knew there were other things out there. But you just have to sort of give it a go, try things. I ran tennis in an administrative form for 3 years, not necessarily for me, but 50% of it was awesome. I did it great. The other 50% not so. But I learned that along the way. And if I could go back and do that job right now, I know I'd do it really well. But that was a first off job in that type of space.
Yeah, it's a pretty extraordinary shift.
So I'm happy. Of course, if I look back from my humble beginnings, I go, wow, you've pushed it to the limit. But I haven't got the ceiling yet. There's still plenty more
of all the things you want to create in the world and share with the world and do in the world.
Yeah, but I don't know what they are yet.
No, you might not know what they are, but you know that you're still a student of life and you're still exploring it all. One
of the great things is that I've learned these types of conversations and things have actually become a part of my career.
Yeah.
Not like in a podcast, but if I sit on Tipping Point and I get 3 new contestants come through every show, it's to draw out of their personality and learn something about them, and that's got to come across a screen. I didn't know I had that attribute, but it's worked. I do. Yeah. But that's just from traveling.
Communication might be one of your core things that you do very well. I reckon it is.
Tash, my wife, would disagree with that occasionally.
Hey, Jelena, you talked about gratitude and kindness. Knowing your journey more in preparation for chatting to you, reading Fearless, it broke. I was in tears from chapter 1. It broke me. What you had to deal with in terms of the level of trauma, your father's violence, the words he used to manipulate and to demonize you, the threats to your life. When you said that, and it's your quote that you don't talk to your father, but you don't hate him.
Yeah.
Now, I'm at the footy on the weekend. And there's people behind me go, oh, bloody, what her name's umpiring, bloody hate him. Hate is so used. It's so easily thrown out there. And yet, how have you learnt to be so grounded in compassion, in understanding, in forgiveness, in love, in gratitude, when it would have been so easy to hate? Who did you lean into? Who helped you find that within yourself? Because there's this jam donut theory, which is inside the jam donut is all the things that are within us. And when we're pressed, anything could come out, but we get to choose what comes out. And you choose these beautiful, grounded, loving values.
I think it's been a couple of people that have been around, that I've been fortunate to be around. I think probably my former partner, I was with him for almost 2 decades. And my late mother-in-law, his mum and dad as well, they were completely the opposite of what I grew up with. And for me, it was always, I was so, even at home, embarrassed of who my father was and who my family was. And for a very long time, I felt like that's me. I am defined by who my father is and what my story is and what I go through. So I always wanted different. I think, Todd, you wanted to kind of go out of what you were as well. I wanted to change who I was. I hated myself for a very long time. It was kind of a natural thing because my father would always put me down. I genuinely today believe that my father is not capable of love and he never loved me. I really don't think my family loved me. It might sound really harsh, but I genuinely believe that.
Because love in its essence, like I don't actually believe in conditional and non-conditional love. I think love in its essence is unconditional.
Yeah.
It should not have conditions. So if you do that, now I love you. Yeah. It's I love you because I love you, who you are.
Well, I think my father only really maybe, I wouldn't even use the word love, respected, whatever you want to use, is if I won and if I brought home money.
It's purely conditional.
And I was very aware of that already as a 9, 10, 11-year-old. He used to tell me that. Yeah.
I think that's the hardest part. Like you keep going, but in our sport, it's your self-respect and worth is driven by a result. I didn't have the beginnings that you did, but there were times when I understand the point of win, success, lose, pauper. Exactly. And that drives you, doesn't it? That kind of defines you and you have to learn to not have that.
Exactly. And
this sort of scarcity mindset.
Yeah, but I also at the same time was like, I don't want to be defined by my father or what I went through. And at the same time though, I never told anyone anything. Even a few people that were close to me didn't know even 50%. When Tin, my former partner, read Unbreakable for the very first time, the first draft, he didn't know the half of it.
Really?
That's how closed I was because I was always told to never tell anyone, be silent. So once even I escaped home, I couldn't open up. So for me, Unbreakable saved my life, literally, to open up like that. But that's what I needed. I needed to almost tell someone, whether publicly or write a book or whether, to my psych, I did all 3, 5, 6, 7 different things and people and books. But that's what I needed. I wanted to change who I was. And I felt like I was defined by who my father was and what I went through, and I wanted to change that. So for me, it was always like I was looking for something and I couldn't find it. And tennis was the worst environment for that as well. Later on, I was always like wins. It would make me feel, that's where I get my validation from. I'm amazing. But when I wouldn't win, I would feel like a loser, right? But I had to then, when I retired, didn't retire on my own terms, had no idea that would be my last singles match in 2011. It was like, okay, things are getting real now. Who am I? I hated who I was, but I at the same time knew I wasn't my father. I knew I wanted different. I knew I was a different person. I could never do what he did. I would like to say I'm very kind and compassionate and have empathy.
I think you've learned to do that.
Yeah.
I've known Jelena for a long, long time. I knew her when I didn't think she had those traits. I've told you that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
They are inside of you. Clearly they're inside of you.
They are.
But the walls are so thick, the masks are so many that you can't break them open.
And that, like, we have some pretty robust conversations sometimes too, because Jelena will go to me, tell me the truth. Was that any good? No. And if I go, it was okay. Well, it was terrible then. I go, no, I'll tell you the truth. But the truth is, like, we were in the Olympic team together in Sydney, 2000, the Woodies last tournament. A lot going on for us. And you ended up 4th, one match away from a medal in singles. But you couldn't talk to her.
Really?
She was so, like, not part of our team. And I've had that discussion with you. I thought you were then, or because
you were devastated about the result, or a mix of both?
I think I know why, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. So we were all in the village, right? We stayed in the village. I actually had a hotel room. I stayed in the nights that I was playing because it's not a great environment sometimes, the village. It's very noisy and things like that. But she was comfortable and safe in the village, but she wasn't allowed. Her dad wouldn't let her because no way was she allowed to get close to any of us. And so because of that, she's got this conflict going on in her head. Oh, these people are nice, but I hate them because my dad said that, and I'm not allowed near them.
That's why I wanted to change.
And that's the manipulation of someone who is abusive.
Yeah, that's why I talk about domestic violence and child abuse and the impact of it and the consequences, especially on your mental health as well, which I almost paid a price for. You're conflicted because I wasn't allowed to have friends. I actually, if I ever smiled, I would get beaten, literally. So I was in this thing where I had to not smile, not talk to people. I, in fact, had to be rude to people.
And you were.
And I was. No, but I was.
I
had to fire my coaches. He left it up to me as a 13-year-old to go and fire people and be really rude to them. So I remember 10 years later, after I would do that, and when I escaped home, I would see Leslie and Barry and Bill Barry and Tony Roach and people that were around me and wanted really good things for me. But I had to treat them and fire them in such a bad way that I remember I went to Tony in 2000 and whatever it was, 5, and I started crying and I said, Tony, I have to say sorry. But even though I want to tell you it wasn't me, I know it comes down to me because I treated you that way and fired you that way. And to this day, I have such a hard time talking to those people because I feel so bad for having to do, even though they know it wasn't me and that I was young and that I had to do it, that I was forced to do it. It kind of, you're put in this position that is
in abusive relationships. You're manipulated to behave in ways that you don't want to.
Yeah.
And then you ostracize people in your life who could be really helpful to you because you're protecting the person that's abusing you. And I want to talk to you about domestic violence. I know we're going to get back to all sorts of things, but it is such a topical issue at the moment, and you're such a wonderful advocate for women in this space. Apart from the majority of the problem being men who need to be better, men just need to be better. That's just categorically the real issue. Secondary, we've got a system that enables perpetrators to re-abuse, and that needs to change. But thirdly, and this is more pertaining to, maybe parts of your story, is that for some women, not a lot, for some women who experience abuse, there's this shame attached to it.
Yep.
And they stay in relationships that they don't want to be in because they feel too shameful to talk about what they've actually experienced. Is that something you talk about? Do you feel that connection to that experience?
Oh, yeah.
And what do you say to women who you can see going through that, or to inspire change in that space?
Well, for a very long time in general, if you talked about anything that was domestic violence or child abuse or even mental health or eating disorders, you were shamed and stigmatized. There was a label on it, let's be honest. So even if you said 10 years ago that you're going to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you would be labeled crazy straight away, like something was wrong with you. If women came out and said that they were abused or they were in domestic violence relationships, or even young women or girls, same thing. It would be victim blaming. So the blame wouldn't be put at the abusers and perpetrators, it would be at us. So like you said, so many women stayed and hid that just for this kind of outside thing that everything is good, I'm not going to be shamed, I'm not going to be stigmatized. So they really felt like they wouldn't be understood. I had the same thing. When I went into writing Unbreakable, I had that fear of going, are people going to kind of put this label on me and shame and stigmatize me, or go, she's just doing this for attention, which is such a wrong way of looking at it, because people were suffering in silence and even dying in silence while there was all of this shame and stigma. So I made it my mission to really go, you know what, I'm going to tell my story because I think it can help someone actually in one way or another, but I'm not going to be afraid of that shame and stigma. There's nothing to be there's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, I think that victims and survivors should be celebrated. We should be listening to their stories so that we can do better. And now we're seeing with people like Grace Tame,
Yep.
with the Me Too movement, with Simone Biles and the US gymnastics team and what they uncovered. It's changed things. It's changed laws. It's changed and brought in things that we never had before, but only because those women had this amazing ability to be vulnerable, to go, I don't care about the shame and stigma. This is for the greater good. And that's where we're now able to make change.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting point that comes next, right? That you and I had this discussion about
6 months ago.
6 months ago. And it was, this was really hard because I had to have this discussion because with Jelena and social media, she was stuck in this block of, and I'm just going to say it, poor me, where when she was having a bad day, I knew exactly when she was having a bad day because of what she would put up on her social. And I got to the point where I pulled her aside and said, okay, you got to pivot. Your next pivot is here. Because of all of the things that she just explained and had done, she had got, you're never going to get over it, but she was at a point where there was, for me, real clarity about who she was, what she wanted to do, how it was. The pivot came about, if you're having a shit day, give me a call. But don't put up on your social, that you're in tears and you're feeling down, because you are now a vehicle for people to feel the positivity. And I felt like there were times when you were taking it back to a part that I think that you'd got past.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get totally past.
Yeah.
But this was really important. And I mean, I think that pivot for you became this next person and part of your behind the mask moment where you actually are now able to disseminate your emotions far better of your good days, bad days, and allow that not to sort of, I would call it now in your good working life, because you are the positive person out there to make change.
Yeah, you're right. It was tough for me because I felt like I want to continue kind of being the voice and the face, let's say, and be the person that people know that stands up for a lot of issues, especially a lot of issues that women go through.
Yep.
So I
I love that you do that.
Thank you.
And I not just have respect, and thanks for it. There were times in the book where the thanks I wanted to go through, like I was audiobooking, I was reading, I wanted to go through the pages and hug you and just say, I'm so proud of you. I'm so with you. I don't know you, but I love you. That's what that's what it. So you're making impact, and I'm a man who doesn't ever feel that fear going to a car, going through the park, going anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't feel that, and I still felt so much of you.
Well, here's the thing, you saying that because of what's been happening lately and how bad the domestic violence numbers are and what's been happening. See, that is exactly why I go, we need to continue the conversation. But the balance for me has been, and Todd's right, you might come across, I feel sorry for myself or poor me, but it actually wasn't, but I didn't know how to translate that into going,
so
I'm
I might
here
have
for
come across
everyone.
feeling harsh and bad there.
No, you're not.
But I could see, I was watching things going, we're at that again, whereas I knew there's so much more.
Yeah.
I could see so much more.
Doesn't mean you don't have days and moments where you just, you talk so beautifully. It's this sort of 3-part statement. From victim to survivor to thriver. I love it. I love it so much. But it doesn't mean there's not days where you don't feel a bit like a victim, or days where you don't, or moments where you don't feel like I'm in that survivor. But you have the capacity and to choreograph and dance through all 3 of those things. And that's what's inspiring.
I think that was where I was at with you.
And Todd was absolutely right.
There was 2. The survivor bit, you hadn't fully got to that, right? Would that be fair?
Yeah. I was after I wrote my second book.
But you were quite not, I don't think you were, for me, as your friend, you weren't delivering that.
Yeah.
And that was why we had this kind of really interesting discussion one day.
It's interesting because when Fearless came out, which was in September, so we're now in May, I changed my keynote presentation for my speaking.
Really? What did it, from what to?
From what it was to what it is now.
What was it?
So it was pretty much 80% of my original keynote presentation was all about my story, what I went through. And only 20% was, okay, but you can get out of that. You can still kind of a bit of hope and positivity. Yeah. Now I tell my story for 8 minutes and the other half an hour are completely on thriving.
Yeah.
And the tools that have helped me to get there.
Tell me about those tools.
So I go into going, look, we are going to go through adversity and hardship with one way or another. We heard Todd's story.
That's life.
We it's life. Not everyone's going to have a family. Not everyone's going to, have.
But suffering is a part of the human
Exactly.
condition. We all, it'll be all sorts of different versions of it, but it's a part of being human.
So I talk about the impact I want to make through sharing my story publicly, but then I talk about, okay, how did I get to thriving? So for me, it's been finding my self-worth, finding that self-belief, the power of vulnerability and shattering the myth of perfection. It's been finding my passion in life, both privately and professionally. It's been finding a lot more humor and positivity and being less harsh on myself and actually giving myself a pat on the back where I was always so harsh on myself. Power of gratitude, power of kindness. But also then I flip it and I go, and that's where I tell the story about Todd, and everyone goes, "Oh, we want a Todd in our life." But I actually just go to show, but I actually go to show that it's so important that also we are there for other people and we create a safe space and environment. Yep. Because we are, I think, kind of programmed to go, you need a family, you need 50 friends. No, you don't. Not everyone's going to have that. So how do we make the most of that? I didn't have any of that at one stage. I felt like I had no family, had no friends. I had no one that supported me.
You and Tim broke up?
No, this was after I left home while I was still playing. I really felt isolated. I felt alone. Then when I broke up, I was really alone. But then I still had other people. But sometimes you feel like something's always missing.
Hold up. Lonely or alone?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
And then I've gone, you know what? You need one person. And you can move mountains. And that was what Todd was for me, professionally, privately. So now I tell the story also to flip the script and go, you can be someone's Todd. Right? So I have people coming to me, this is my Todd, and I love that. No, but because it is.
It's so beautiful.
I talk about some of those tools, but see, I didn't talk about that a year ago.
No.
It was all about my story.
I didn't want it talking about me. It wasn't about me, but it was about that, wasn't it?
But it was to set the example. I talk about, my late mother-in-law and a few different examples. I don't always talk about Todd, but it's important to go, you know what, okay, how do I make the rest of my life good? Let's not let the past define us and defeat us. That doesn't define your future. Yeah. You can create a great future and still be happy. So I think those things I had to get to, though.
This is so amazing that, so much of our healing and, I mean, God, I've had to go through a hell of a lot of it. And so many of them are things you're talking about, the power of vulnerability, reestablishing what your self-worth is and not allowing that to be defined purely on what you do, but on who you are, the power of gratitude practices and gratitude journaling. And I mean, that's very popular at the moment, and I think it's sort of been distorted in a way that people just write, I'm grateful for the trees, I'm grateful for my friend, I'm grateful for and gratitude's a feeling. You have to feel it in order for it to have its power.
What you just talked about there, I talk about that as well. It's toxic positivity.
Yeah, toxic
and it's
positivity.
A fine line between a positive mindset and this toxic positivity of, just get over it. Yep. So that's where we go. I understood Todd in what he was saying, in pivoting and going, poor me, even though I didn't do it for that reason. For me, it's a fine line because I want people not to feel alone, for example, if they're going through something. But I had to give them also the positivity, which I wasn't doing, but I wasn't ready to do because I wasn't there yet.
But what I love about this is that not a lot of people talk about that person. They talk about a partner or they talk about a family member, but to have someone who's even more than a friend, a guide, a mentor, someone who's going to be brutally honest with you, but is going to put their arms around you and hold you and love you and allow you to speak your truth and allow you to be vulnerable around them. We don't talk about that enough in our world.
No, but you've got to be able to have a strategy to get to that, though. Yeah. It's not like we can talk about it and go, that's what you need to do. This takes time, which is exactly what like Jelena's story. Even in my own family's history, it's taken those time. Don't think you have to do that tomorrow, but you need to have some processes in place, like to be confident enough in your own planning to get there. And I was laughing a minute ago because I see Jelena talking here, and look, she has a smile. So, and you'll understand this in your performance, in your art of what you have to do on stage, is that Jelena used to do her commentary performance with a very dark, harsh voice. There was no smiling in her voice. And when you sing or you talk and you smile, it opens you up.
Yeah,
right?
totally. Radiate joy.
So
love.
these were all things that we talked about. Like she had an inverted smile.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It was the other way.
I did. Yeah.
It was this way all the time. It was never open. And then you have these like discussions about, I've had these discussions about you need to smile when you're commentating because I can then hear it in your voice on the television.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that
so,
at the time.
like,
And where did you, I mean, these are things that you might think of.
I
Oh,
don't
there's
know where
where-
I found them. I just
And I want to talk to you about that because what you guys do is actually really performative. And the joys and ups and downs and stresses and fears and all the things that come with something that's performative. And yes, you were doing something that's performative as tennis players, but it's not on show. You're just going out there to win a match. How have you, I mean, you're absolutely, it's almost 20 years of doing it now, but how have you, how did you find that going into it? Do you still have days where you go, oh, fuck, I was so shit. Really?
Every day.
Really?
I think my biggest thing that I take away is watch, listen, and learn. Like watch somebody that does it really well. Listen to them because you can hear it. Like a smile is you can hear that in a person's voice when they're behind the microphone and it's just their voice and not their picture. The watch, listen, learn is what I've done.
And who did you watch it? Nuke?
I watch all these different types of people.
And I did that with Todd.
Right.
Yeah, and and then
he's very good.
no, I actually
Just to
think
act like he's not here.
No, I think I'm rubbish.
No, everything he told me. Yeah, go and do every single thing, small or big, paid or not paid. That's the first thing he told me when I started. Just say yes.
Yeah.
It's also about it will make you better. It will make you more comfortable. I did that. I watched every single match and listened to every single match and learned from every single match that that you and Jim Courier did. They're my two best in the business. So I would watch them relentlessly. I would finish my commentating and I still to this day go and listen to them. So it's things like that.
But, that just comes from, I guess, trying to pull in as much info. I've got this philosophy that, and I've seen a lot of my peers, tennis playing peers, not do this. And it was another thing of watching. I was always, as an athlete, struggling with my serve. So I always had all this information coming in and sometimes it just made you confused. But I never let the confusion get at me. I just let it go and took the one thing that would work. And it's the same, again, so many people get hung up on what doesn't work instead of looking for the next bit that might, so that it's just the percentages, small percentages, and then they add to your repertoire and then you're good to go.
I feel like that as a singer often, especially as a sort of young tenor trying to work out how to access that top part of my range and make those, high, powerful, effortless sounds. You get so much information from various people and they're all right.
And sometimes you need one particular cue.
Exactly. It's about being coached well because nothing that people are saying are wrong, but it just doesn't resonate with me
or work for
and work for you and work in my body. And it is, serving is super technical. What did you struggle with? Just by the way, I'm not terrible.
Josh is quite a good tennis player, by the way.
Okay.
So
he wanted me to say that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just putting it out there because
We need to have a hit.
I'm defined by that.
Okay.
That's literally that's my mask.
He is the best music singer, theatre performer, tennis player.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's out there. Yeah.
What was it about the serve that you were struggling with?
Just everything. If I look back on it now, when I was being taught as a young kid, and I was as I said earlier, I was good when I was really young, but had no strength. So you find a way to get the ball in the court with all the wrong grips and things. So then you have to adjust that. And then the technique that I was being taught was the technique of the 60s and 70s. And I crossed over in the first
slicey.
First iteration of video coming into play. So video recorders were just coming along when I was at the Australian Institute of Sport. We used to be able to put the tape in and watch ourselves back. Couldn't record, but you could watch various things, and then the recorder came. Boris Becker came along, completely different technique than anyone had ever used before. So my serve from the beginning to the end was a full transformation of a reinvention of technical coaching.
Was Becker? I might be wrong, and I'm just asking this. Was Becker the first person to kick? So
pretty much, he crossed over, but he used legs in a very different way.
Yes.
So he used what we would call a platform base, using the legs to drive upwards as opposed to just crossing over and serve volleying with a flowing motion forward. So completely different.
What is really clear about both of you is that hard work, like 100% is not enough. 110 might not be enough. Let's push to 150. Like, can we do dedication, diligence in all that you do, and that is incredible because talent is just a seed, and we've got to actually water it with hard work for it to flourish and grow into a beautiful plant of full potential. But on the other side of that is sometimes anxiety and stress and all those things. How do you sometimes just go, all right, I'm checking out for a sec.
I don't think I check out, really.
Not check out, or just go, these are my practices for getting back to being Todd.
Okay, so I do have something in that for you, which I don't know if I've ever used with you, Jelena, or we've talked about. But as you know, Josh, I've got a son who's in your field. Yep. And not that long ago, I had to sit down with him because I've never had to give him anything. He just does. He drives himself in terms of his motivation, his work ethic, flawless. But I got sat down several times. I used to do it with my trainer, Mark Waters, and it was the boxes. And let's say you have, maybe it's 5 boxes in your life that need to be in order for you to perform at your best. Mm-hmm. So as a tennis player, you've got your technical, you've got your physical, you have your mental, you have your personal, which can be relationships, let's say, sex.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to deal with that, particularly when you're younger. And then whatever else you want to put over into the next box. Maybe it's finance for you or for anybody. Mm-hmm. And you go through them. And we used to do this regularly. Technique's good. Physical, I've got to get back onto that. Personal's good. Married. Life's good. Kids. And I did this with Bo because he'd got to a point where I said, there's a box, let's put them all down. And I sat with him and we wrote them, and one was empty. And he'd lost focus on this particular box. I don't want to say what that box was.
Oh, I'm so interested.
It's all good. No, it's all good. But it's about, so in your industry, it's voice, it's physical.
It's all those things that you're talking about.
It's look, it's your relationships.
Yep.
And so he had neglected one, and he knew. And I didn't even have to say it, but it was a way for him to get that box back in shape. He did it, and he has kind of redefined himself in the right way again. It's really important that you get somebody to do it.
Great tool.
But it's something people...
We didn't do this.
We haven't done it. So
imagine how much I'm going to grow now in the next 12 months.
I'm
going to do it now too.
You will know, like, this box is half full at the moment, or it's a tick or it's a cross, whichever way you want to do it. But I use that tool still myself occasionally, going, I've neglected this and I have to get back on top of that. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is that you use the word talent, right? So talent is such an overused word in every single industry because, there's a very good Australian player of late who is incredibly talented. But how many of those boxes are a tick and a cross? I'd say 2 really big ticks. Half a tick and 2 crosses. And that's why the achievement level on a court hasn't been as big.
Let's call him Rick.
Rick. Yeah. The greatest players, though, like a Djokovic and a Federer and Nadal and Serena's, they fall occasionally, but their boxes are all in the right order. And they're the skilled ones. I mean, Djokovic for me is probably the most, kind of crazy about all of that 1% type thing. But that's an essential tool that I think for all 3 of us here would look at today and go, oops, I better go and double check.
Yeah.
And on that, you're right, which I know straight away.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm going to do that this afternoon.
Me too.
And I know straight away there's one for sure missing, and and I'm very actually aware of that kind of, even consciously, and I'm working on it. But I think that the whole talent thing, I believe that for a while, although I really believe in hard work and I believe that what you're going to put in is what you're going to get out. But did I think I had a talent for speaking or writing or communicating or actually meeting people? And no, I didn't. Did I think that I could even, to be honest with you, commentate or do it? No, I didn't. But I actually went out there. I did everything to try and
You did work harder.
make that happen. I didn't go, maybe I need a talent to go and do public speaking.
It's so interesting. If I was to like flash back to a presser of you from, the 90s or late 90s or even when you come back and now
I know.
the human development is
massive.
astronomical.
Well, I say this in my keynote presentation because I talk about how you can reinvent yourself and the tools to get there. But
we're all Madonna.
11 years ago, when when we sat down after I finished playing, what I'm going to do is I had no social skills. I couldn't string 2 sentences together.
Oh, you're being harsh there.
No,
baffles me.
really.
No,
and I couldn't look people in the eye.
No,
I
you
couldn't
do that. No.
Really?
I was struggling. Do I say hello? Do I not
because
say
you
hello?
felt like they could see what was
it was
going on
just-
behind all the things. They could see the real me, and maybe there
But
was
also, I had to have that conversation with me, with myself. Who am I? What do I want to, who am I as a person? How do I want to live the rest of my life? And once I posed that question, as scary as it was, everything turned around.
You know
I
what?
think I can talk
Can I
underwater?
finish?
No.
Can I go back?
Which I can do now.
Can I go back to the boxes? Because the one thing about those boxes for me as a parent to my child was that if I had gone in on the topic directly, it would have
on the missing box.
it would have been really harsh and hard and come across the wrong way.
And what do you think it would have been met with from Bo?
He would have resisted.
Yeah.
And you don't want that resistance. And I think it's actually a way that everyone's got to remember about how you target things. Mm-hmm. I targeted with Jelena some of her things through a broader conversation. Yeah. So then they could pull back
and allow them to find it for themselves.
But not take it, not challenge. Like in my youth, I would have challenged on that immediately, and that would have caused an issue. I think there's this way of learning how to get to that person issue, topic, without scaring them and
with
driving
love.
them
Balanced.
away. Yeah, it's just using the psychology for them to have time to think through it, to get the acceptance of what might need to be fixed or dealt with.
Yeah. It mightn't even be fixed because
no, you don't necessarily fix everything.
No, or anything. And as men, I think that's probably our biggest issue, that we're trying to fix everything all the time and everyone. But just actually giving them the lens to see it so that they can...
Yeah, that's a great... I love that way.
Yeah, and they can then look at it in the way that they'll know, because we know ourselves well. We just sometimes don't want to put that lens on.
Yeah, but you see the way that we're talking now, and this is the whole... thing I'm trying to make when it comes to a lot of issues in society is we need the open conversations to be able to change something.
Yes.
So shying away from talking about domestic violence or child abuse or eating disorders or mental health doesn't solve anything, right? So these are the type of conversations we need to have with ourselves, with our friends, with our family, with within our workplaces, sports, schools, and we haven't done that because of the shame and stigma. 10 years ago, I would not be talking about, and many people like me as public speakers, what we talk about now. It was not like...
It's not even uncomfortable. Now it's uncomfortable. Some of it, they are really uncomfortable and sticky and muddy and...
But because we're talking about it, it's getting...
It cleans
It's normalised, right?
Yeah.
But then you find solutions, which is what Todd talks about when you talk to your kids or talk to me. But that's the way to solve things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, yes, you're saying in this space of keynote speaking and there's you're creating a discourse around things that weren't, but I still firmly believe in society at the moment, and it's with social media and media, we are doing things more binary and more divisive than ever before. If you're this, you're not this, If you're anti-Biden, that means you're pro-Trump. Like, no. There is a whole bunch of stuff in the middle that is grey and uncomfortable. We don't know the answer, but that's the discourse.
I've got an example for you, an amazing example. So I've been really affected with what's been happening recently with domestic violence. And like the statistics, I knew how bad the numbers were, meeting so many people. And like this month and last month was hard, and I even went to talk to my psychiatrist about it. And I said, "Look, I've got a bit of anxiety because I'm hearing it, and you get disappointed that it's not getting better." But what I was disappointed about is also that I know so many amazing men. I know they've helped me, but also I was like, we are separated. Men and women are separating here on this issue. So I did a couple of posts, and it was interesting because thousands of great comments. Great. There was one or two that came in and said, "Well, not all men are bad," but I wrote in my post that I know there are amazing men out there. I've met them. I've had them in my life. Good on you. Great. They completely, as soon as I said, look, we need to call out domestic violence more. We need to have better measures. They shouldn't be out on bail, so on. And so we need help of men and educate our boys. That was it. It was like I was saying men were bad.
Yeah.
And I even said in my post the opposite, but it didn't matter.
Yeah,
So-
because when you read something that is potentially triggering for you, you're blinded by what else might be there.
Yeah.
But it is more of this, and it's part of the reason I'm created this space because I want to have these conversations.
I'm the oldest here, right? Just by a couple of times. And so as an older, white man in his 50s. Who's travelled the world and seen a lot now and experienced a lot. I think my difficulty with some of these types of discussions, not in the way that you've just described, is actually how you get people to do these boxes and fix things when there's an element of feeling a little sorry for themselves and not having you talked about, it's hard, things are difficult. They actually need to be for you
of course
to get better and stronger. And so you've got to actually take that and use it. And I think I'm very concerned for a lot of younger people that don't like the hard
Don't
part
want discomfort.
Because that's what defines you in the end.
You only grow from crisis.
You learn to.
That is where
learn,
we.
I used to choke serving for matches all the time, and I've had to find a way to get over it. It's the same thing in life. You have all these speed bumps, and you've got to find ways to get over them and get smooth again.
Yeah.
But I worry a little bit about the generation that my kids are in, early 20s, because a lot of their things just can't get resolved. It's just, you can't do that, you can't say that. Well, actually, that's true, but we need to get stronger, better. And, I had those issues when I was younger. You just had to find a way, and I'm not saying go back to that, but what I am saying is for the younger people to find a way to be resilient. Look at those things as challenges, not faults.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. There's a lot of wrong in the world, but there's also a lot of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's
uncomfortable's good.
Yeah.
Because it makes you better.
Yeah. That's,
but we're not talking about domestic violence in this situation.
No,
I'm talking about just in a bit more general, because I really think that's a big issue.
well, that's what I mean. Domestic violence is wrong.
That's
it's
wrong.
categorically wrong.
That's absolute.
Well, you would have had to face a lot of, getting back to tennis a bit, a lot of discomfort on the court. And I know as a performer, the thing that's similar is if a moment doesn't go the way you want it to go, or a point doesn't go the way you want it to go, you can get into that mindset of being where you are, thinking about how that last point or how that last note or how that last set or whatever, and not be where you are now, not be where all the beauty. And I looked at what I love about Federer, and Djokovic aside, I know he's a wonderful player, but my heart has always been with Fed because there was something about his presence and his flow state that was extraordinary to watch. When he was on and it was out of his head, we know those moments, we've seen it. He all the technique, everything was there, and the most beautiful, graceful, elegant backhand would just happen. It would just all happen. But that's because he was right where he is in the present moment. Now, in your lives and careers now, presence, we lose presence all the time. That's where we get anxious, or that's where we get, maybe depressed about something, or we struggle with presence. Did tennis help you find more presence in life? And if so, did you put emphasis? Did you meditate? Did you do breath work? Did you do some of these things that Joker's doing now are all about bringing him back to the here and now? Were these things for you, or are they things for you now?
I was pretty good at that, I can say. But then at the same time, the kind of second part of my career, I wasn't, because I was battling depression, anxiety, and so on, and PTSD. So I knew exactly that if something happened in a match and I lost a point or missed a shot I thought I shouldn't have, that was it. The match was done. And I could feel that. But that's what mental health illnesses or when you struggle. I knew exactly why that was. But what it taught me, though, later on in life as well, is I still had, when I retired, when I went into writing my first book, I had a lot of anxiety. I was still battling depression. So for me, I learned this actually from my psychiatrist on exactly what anxiety is. And like you said, it's past and it's future. That's where we get anxiety from. What we think about happened in the past and that we couldn't change it, and what we think about and we fear the future. And I actually was diagnosed with anticipatory anxiety. For me, it was always anticipating the worst. I would get on a plane and imagine it crashing. That was it. No.
So I would. This is not,
yes, and that comes from feeling like something always bad is going to happen, because for a long time it did. So for me, I had to learn to be in the moment. In today, I don't even make plans. I know I have to go to Sydney in 2 days. I don't even look at notes on what I have to do and who my client is. I will focus on that when it's time. Live in today, live for today. But I also had to learn to go, okay, you know what? It's not what if. What if I had a different family? But I didn't. But for a long time I thought, well, what if I did? What if I didn't miss that shot? I would have won the match. I would have maybe gone to the quarterfinals of a Grand Slam. So it's really actually damaging.
The what ifs.
The what ifs and going back and focusing on something. But what I really learned is control what you can and you can't control the uncontrollables, what's not in your hands. And my psychiatrist, we were talking about that a lot, and he really brought me to thinking, wow, that's actually really the case. So I can't change what's happened 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. Maybe that's why I got to a stage of I can go past my past now and what I've been through, but I'm focusing on today, yes, the future, but also not too far ahead. People ask me all the time, what are you going to do in 5 years? I actually go, I'm chilling. I've said going into my 40s, when I turned 40, from 39 to 40, it's a year of chill. I'm just going to do whatever comes. I'm 41 now. I've done it for 2 years.
You're dreaming if you think you're going to chill.
No, but chill in a way, what's chill for me? I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
I mean that in a good way.
Work, great. Travel, great. Whatever comes along, friends, go out, great.
It's the next
pivot.
I'm
more, I think you need to not look back. What ifs? I think that what ifs are really dangerous. What if?
And that control thing, sorry, Todd, control thing about going, a lot of anxiety is about going, hey, what couldn't I control and trying to control it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's Marcus Aurelius. It's old and bedded in Stoic philosophy as anything could possibly be. Control what you can control. But fuck, it's hard.
It is.
It is. God, it's hard. Yeah.
For me, I was, I probably still am, but I think this is where I got better, a massive perfectionist. I really used to struggle. My entire thing was about performance and if I would win. And I used, towards the end of my playing career, I found that very hard. I just didn't like the feeling that used to drive up. And we threw in Rick's name there before, Rick or Nick. Or I really feel there are times when I've watched him play and I can see like the blood pressure monitor just going up. And I used to feel like that. So I have a lot of sympathy and understanding for some of the way I've had to call matches with Nick. And I hated that feeling. But what I learnt post sort of playing and towards the end of my career, and now I actually don't mind making a mistake when I'm on air or things like that. I found a way to laugh at it and to be a little deprecating or whatever. Poke fun at myself.
Yeah, don't take yourself too seriously.
I've found that to be so much better and actually works. Yeah. It works.
I've struggled so much with it, with perfectionism.
Of course,
and doing the thing that we do 8 times a week. I mean, it actually took to playing Jean Valjean in London and a role that is impossible to maintain the standards that I was maintaining, let's say, in Phantom, in that role. It is just a marathon. It requires so much physically, emotionally, vocally. You just cannot go out there and be the one-off concert version, perfect vocals. And I just had to let go of it. And it was the best thing I needed because I'd spent my whole career as a perfectionist. And now I go, I've got voice things going on from injuries and whatnot. And I'm just happy to go a bit in a very different way, Jelena, but a bit like you in that going, hey, my struggle, could be someone else could gain from this. Yeah. I'm going to tell my story openly. I'm going to share it so that others can feel seen and heard in it.
So I mentioned some of the things that I talk about with vulnerability and then shattering that myth of perfection. Because
shattering the myth of perfection. Yeah, I love that.
Because we lived with that. We were taught that way. And I grew up in a household and with a father that no matter what I did, it was never going to be good enough. Doesn't matter what I did. Doesn't matter who I beat, how much money I earned. It was not enough, ultimately, right? So I was really hard on myself. I would have wins or play 10 amazing points and Todd, you know this, and then I would miss one shot. It would be the end of the world. And
I was like that.
Yeah, but I couldn't get out of that cycle. And then I remember you actually said to me when I started commentating as well, just do your thing, do your job, don't worry about anything else, a day at a time, you'll improve. And then I actually, like what you said, I asked you this year at the United Cup first day, did you listen or when we commentated together, tell me honestly, because I always ask Todd for feedback. And he said, do you want my honest opinion? I said, yeah, of course, because he knows I get angry if he's not honest. But he said, just talk a bit less here, just a little bit less here. It was a little bit too much. And you know what? 10 years ago, I would have gone, oh my God, this is a disaster. This is like the worst thing I could ever hear. What do I do now? Like I would have been distraught, but I couldn't wait till the next day. I was like, let's go fix it. Yeah. And I think you have to get comfortable with making mistakes and failing and falling. And that's the only way to grow.
I think also there though, it's you do need to look at ourselves with a bit of self-assessment and look back and
try and improve.
Oh, yeah.
You can go, hey, there's not this thing of going.
But I took that from Todd, and he said,
easy.
End of the set, you said, and so I would take that in.
But I mean, living in a glass house, I'm not perfect either, so I have to try to do that myself as well. Or someone will say to me, can you control this a little bit more from the producer? And I go, sorry.
And there's this thing about the perfectionism and letting it go, that doesn't come with, hey, I'm imperfect, which means I'm just going to stuff up all the time. I'm going to let go of all my... There's actually, I know I'm imperfect, but however, I'm going to strive to improve and grow and grow and be the best version of myself, knowing full well that I am imperfect and I will make mistakes.
It's about improving, not chasing perfection, because actually perfection doesn't exist.
No, it's not.
It's unattainable when you think about it. Yeah.
Hey, I feel like in this beautiful relationship that you guys have, it is an amazing relationship, and
sometimes gets a bit grating. We've got 2 lots of 14 days coming up, in a row. Oh, what day's hump day usually? About day 6. Is
this the French?
6 to 8.
Yeah. But
we've got 15 days.
Not everyone gets to be a fly on the wall, and actually an annoying fly on the wall that's involving itself in the conversations that you guys have. So this is really precious for me, and I'm really I'm mega grateful for the opportunity to get to be a part of it.
It's so funny because you're focusing on our tennis, and I explain Jelena. I'm trying to in a completely different sphere get her into the arts. So she's never really, this is
I'll get you along to some things.
Yeah, and I keep telling her, you've got to come to this, you're going to like this.
I'll get you in.
And so, when I said, that you and I had been in contact about having a chat today, and I said, now Josh, he's done all of this, So it's like being number one in the world and winning majors, to have gone and been Phantom, in London and Jean Valjean, and it's all the things I've dreamt about doing myself in music theatre.
Really? I knew that. So finally it comes out. I'm like, why does Todd love musicals so much? Not because Bo's into them. No, it's actually because he wants to get in. So but Shane Crawford can get into one.
While you're working on the recovery of your voice, and maybe you can teach me, because I need a lot of work.
Well, on teaching, I know that what I was going to say is that there's been You've obviously helped Jelena so much, but I want to know, where has Jelena taught you, and what has she taught you?
Oh, well, I think
nothing.
No, not at all. I think actually, what I've learned actually is becoming a mentor to different people. I probably didn't recognize at the beginning of when this all started, and I've done it with other people in tennis as well, was that I actually quite enjoy coaching, even technical tennis, but I'm my best at the elite level. And it's not about necessarily all technical grips. It's about how you're tactically going to play and getting the person into a position to be on the court to perform their best, even if there is a glitch somewhere. But it's about headspace.
Yep.
And I got to that because I've been in bad headspaces myself. I've often been so hard and not really understood myself. But that listening, watching, learning that I talked about earlier has allowed me to become really quite good in this space, and I enjoy it. I have found the best way to do it was to be open about my own issues. That's what
lead with vulnerability.
Yes, because
Brené Brown is always on.
I tell you, you go to a young player, male or female, and you say something, and you say you got to do it like this. You have to do it like that. You don't do it like this because you're not, and you go then with the story. When I was in your position, this is how I felt, and I was struggling. They look at you completely differently because now you're on their level, and that for me was the biggest thing I learned about all these things. Jelena's got her story, but so did I.
Yeah, of course.
And by expressing that to different people, and I had an issue, with my brother and the family where we didn't see him for a long time. But my parents, that was such a dark time for them. They didn't know how to deal with that very well. They were loving, but in those times, you just pushed everything under the rug. You never talked about it to anybody else. Now we do. And for them, it was very therapeutic. And all my family are gone. I'm the last. My two brothers are gone, my mum and dad. And I know, though, at the end of my parents' lives, they were both very willing to let everyone know their story because they started to feel how helpful that was to them to have that off their shoulders. And so that all comes into what I've done about talking to people, mentoring people, and enjoying it. Because if you are vulnerable yourself, I can then also talk about winning Wimbledon. I can talk about these incredible highs and knowing what that pressure felt like and knowing how to walk out onto a court in a Wimbledon final and enjoy that crowd and appreciation as you get ready for a match, probably like you as you're in the wings for your first big moment to walk out, or at the end when you take your bows to when we might hold a trophy. Like they're all experiences that people want to have, and you can light them up for them to look forward to trying to do it.
Yeah. So beautiful. Hey, something we didn't talk about that I do want to touch on, and in the space of vulnerability is, mate, you had a heart attack 2 years ago.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
I mean, it's major, and we've spoken about it, but I've never asked you, when they tell you you've had a heart attack and you're in your 50s.
I was 51 now.
Yeah, and you are healthy and you always look fit and you're always there, as in humanly there. What did it make you feel, and how did you have to shift your mindset or your cares and where you put your attention?
Well, I thought I was in reasonable shape.
You're always in reasonable shape.
Yeah. But in everything, like reasonable shape's home, family, life, all the boxes.
All the five,
yeah. I actually went to work how many days later?
Yeah,
4
days later. We were filming.
We launched the Australian Open together 4 days after
Unbelievable.
3 days after I came out of hospital.
Episode of Cross Court.
Look, it was very mild, and I still to this day, through all the testing, don't really know why I kind of had it. But now, what I looked at it was that I had every test under the sun. I now know where I sit. There are times when I feel I'll just back off a little bit. It's doing 160 episodes of Tipping Point at the end of last year. I needed to get in, do my exercise because I was putting on weight. But at the same time, I knew if I did that, I probably would get myself to a point where my immune system would start to rattle a bit and I'd get sick and I couldn't do that. So I had to back off a little bit. I read my body and mind a little better than I did. And it's just a wake-up call, really. I mean, I think what it said was that you're 50 and you are not invincible anymore, and you need to do these health checks. And that's the biggest thing, is that whether it be your cholesterols, your everything that goes with it. Check your heart stuff out. Go through your family history. That was important.
Because you had cholesterol history in the family.
This is the thing that you've had to deal with, Jelena, throughout your, more recent times, is these trolls and things like that. And I was trolled by anti-vaxxers who the only reason I had a heart attack was I took a vaccine. Well, that's rubbish. complete and utter rubbish. My family history has had, it was at the beginning of what my dad has had. My mum had stents and all those sorts of things. So that was an interesting, part of that was have people come and abuse me for having a heart attack.
Yeah, the moment you're like, we talk about compassion and coming from love.
It was bizarre. But what it did, what I was trying to get to was that look at your family history, understand where you might be able to get ahead of the game. Because we didn't have that in past generations. You just, someone had a heart attack, they had a heart attack. The next generation didn't try to source why, how can I avoid that? And so I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that.
Did it make you not just think about your family history, but your family future?
A little bit.
Did it make you go?
Yeah. Well, so I like to lighten things up and joke a bit, but it's not really. Like I lost both my brothers at 58. Yeah. So I've got to get past 58 is my target. And my family goes, shut up, Dad. Don't be like that.
But that's a strength because he uses humour, and I've learned that from Todd.
Yeah. Or sarcasm is a bit.
Well, or dark humour, however you want to do it. But what he did, I found out, he sent me a picture from the hospital saying, oh, well, just had a heart attack. We'll see if I'll make it for the launch of the Australian Open in 72 hours. He was joking about it. He was there.
I couldn't joke about that
No, but that's...
it was okay.
It is a power, though,
right.
to be able to bring a bit of humour into it.
Totally. As long as you're also also acknowledging that it is a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're so loved by your family. There's a beautiful Rumi quote, Rumi, famous poet. Love is the bridge between you and everything. And, we see that in what you guys do and what you've achieved, but also who you are, where your values sit with your work life, each other. But those values of family, that's everything. I know that's everything.
I think to that point, actually, it shocked my family and my kids more than
that's what I meant when I said about your future, about life potentially without Dad. Like that's
that was an interesting. I think that was probably a tougher moment for Zara and Bo than it was even for me, because I knew I was going to be okay. I felt that.
Yep.
They though faced that probable inevitability for the first time in their lives, that he isn't going to be there, or those things can change. So it was I probably found 6 months later a little more challenging than I found a month or two. It was more the reflection of the thoughts that come through your mind, and it took me a little while to get I think some issues right with blood pressure and various things. So there were times when I get this little feeling, you go, oh my God, what's that?
Yeah,
is that happening again?
Yeah,
but I, got all that sorted.
It's just a little sharp pain in the chest, and then
it could be anything. Yeah. And because that's what I had previous to the actual thing. I'd had some flutters, and my cardiologist said, "No, that wasn't anything to do with it." But my mind's going, absolutely, it was.
Yeah.
So,
we're so glad
I'm still
through
here.
That. You're still there, and because I'm not going to speak for Jelena, but I know her answers because. We love you.
Oh, that's
we think you are such a wonderful human.
I don't know about that, but
you are. And
you are.
And honestly, to have you both on the show today, your values beyond all the things that you do are compassion and kindness and love and gratitude and sharing and helping and supporting people. You are two, as I said at the start, extraordinary humans. It has been such a privilege to have you both on the show today.
Well,
Thanks for coming.
I've loved it for a particular reason. I'm a fan of yours and your business, if you like, but also it's the first time we've ever sat in a situation, a podcast or any communication outside of our own
chats
in this environment. Yeah. So it's actually been quite fun.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's been good.
Thanks for coming on, guys.
Amazing.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you for having us.